The late summer air in Clearwater carried that soft, salty warmth that made the palm trees sway lazily against a cloudless blue sky. Linda sat on her back porch, a glass of iced tea beating with condensation beside her, thinking how peaceful the weekend was going to be. She had just finished her career as a high school English teacher earlier that year, and she still hadn't grown used to the quiet. No ringing bells between classes, no papers to grade, no teenagers asking for extra credit at the last minute. Just her small house, and the occasional hum of cicadas. That Friday morning, her son Mark had pulled into her driveway with his wife, Emily, and Emily's mother, Patricia. They were headed for a 2-day beach getaway down the Gulf Coast, something they'd been talking about for months. Mark had asked if she could take care of their golden retrievers, Max and Daisy, while they were gone. The request wasn't unusual. Linda loved those dogs as if they were her own. Max was the older of the two, a mellow 5-year-old with deep amber eyes, while Daisy was a boisterous 2-year-old who believed that every moment was an invitation to play. As Mark unloaded their food, bowls, and toys from the trunk, Daisy's tail wagged so hard her whole body wiggled, and she nearly knocked over Emily's overnight bag. "Thanks again, Mom," Mark said, handing her a neatly typed note. "Feeding times, portion sizes, and, oh, Daisy needs her joint supplement at night. We'll be back late Sunday." He gave her a quick hug before helping Patricia into the back seat. Emily smiled, adjusting her sunglasses. "We owe you one, Linda. The dogs adore you." Linda waved them off, watching the car disappear down the street until it was just another shimmer in the heat. The plan was simple: feed the dogs, water the plants, keep an eye on the mail. She even thought about baking a batch of blueberry muffins in the morning to enjoy with her coffee. Inside the house, the dogs quickly settled into their routine. Max claimed a cool tile near the kitchen, while Daisy sprawled across the living room rug, chewing her favorite squeaky toy. Linda put away the dog food, checked the note again, and placed it on the counter next to a small stack of mail Mark had left there. It wasn't unusual for them to leave a few envelopes behind, probably bills they'd handle when they got back. She noticed one with a bright red stripe across the top, the word urgent printed in bold, capital letters. She picked it up, turning it over in her hand, and for a moment thought about opening it, but she decided against it. It wasn't her business, and she figured if it was truly urgent, Mark would have mentioned it before they left. The rest of the day passed without incident. She took the dogs for a long walk to the neighborhood, pausing to chat with Mr. Henderson, the elderly widower who lived 2 houses down. Back home, she prepared a simple dinner of baked salmon and steamed vegetables, then settled in with a novel she'd been meaning to finish. The house felt calm, the only sound the occasional thump of Daisy's tail and the hum of the ceiling fan. As the sun dipped below the horizon, streaking the sky in shades of pink and gold, Linda thought about how nice it was to have these little responsibilities, a reason to be up early, to take long walks, to feel needed. She closed her book, fed the dogs her evening meal, and locked the front door before heading to bed. In her mind, it was going to be a restful weekend, the kind that made her grateful for the slower pace of retirement. She couldn't have guessed that in less than 24 hours, the phone would ring and her peaceful weekend would turn into a race against time, one that would leave her son stranded at the beach, desperate for answers. By early evening, the house held that hush that settles after dinner, the kind that makes every small sound feel deliberate. Linda wiped down the counters with slow circles, letting the citrus cleaner lift the faint traces of garlic and steam, then set the dish towel to dry on the oven handle. Daisy nosed a rubber bone under the table and huffed, while Max, ever the gentleman, rested his chin on his paws and watched without asking for anything. Linda liked the order of a tidy kitchen. It made her feel as if the rest of life might also be coaxed into neat corners. She gathered the mail into a single stack, squaring the edges with a practiced tap. There are the ordinary envelopes that carried the ordinary responsibilities of an ordinary family, and there was a stiffness to a few of them that suggested checks or cards within. She did not open any. She did not even peer through the thin window of the billing sleeves. Instead, she slid a yellow sticky note from the drawer and wrote in steady cursive that she had organized everything and left on the counter. Then she initialed the note out of habit, as if she were signing off on a classroom supply order. On the refrigerator, a small whiteboard held remnants of household life, a scribbled grocery list, a reminder about a dentist appointment for following Tuesday, and, in Mark's blocky handwriting, a line that read new autopay card ends with 4732. The detail landed oddly, not because it was unusual to note such things, but because the line had been squeezed into a corner, as if added hurriedly, and the ink was a deeper black, still glossy where the marker had pressed harder. Linda did not try to remember numbers anymore. Retirement had taught her that she did not need to carry so many in her head. Still, the note tugged at her attention. She wiped a smudge from the glossy surface and left it there, exactly as she found it. The back door creaked when she tested the lock. It was latched, but the deadbolt needed a firmer twist to catch, and when it did, the house seemed to exhale a subtle settling against the frame. Outside, a late delivery truck rumbled past the cul-de-sac, brakes whispering at the corner, then moved on. Only after it had vanished did Linda notice a thin slip of paper on the mat, barely tucked beneath the edge like a timid guest. She bent and picked it up. The paper carried a courier logo she recognized, though the colors were slightly off, as if the sun had bleached it. The message said a parcel had been delivered to a safe location and included a web address with a coded string that promised details. The driver had written a time that read near dusk, and the name was not quite right. One letter missing from Mark's surname. A harmless error in many cases, but enough to prick the skin of her attention. Linda stepped out, letting the screen door press gently against her hip, and scanned the porch. No parcel sat by the planters. None was tucked behind the wicker chair. She checked the shadowed gap near the hose reel, then the side gate, which was latched with the little hook Mark had installed last spring. Nothing. She folded the slip and kept it in her pocket. Back inside, the kitchen light hummed softly. On the island, beside the stacked envelopes, lay a receipt from a neighborhood hardware store. The ink a touch faded. Linda would not have noticed it if not for a handwritten note across the bottom. Call about billing. The last 4 digits of a phone number were scrawled there, but she did not dial. She turned the receipt over with the tip of a finger and found a second note, likely from the same hurried hand. New card, same account. That by itself was not remarkable. People updated cards routinely. Still, she felt the vague sensation of stepping into a room and knowing a picture frame was askew without yet seeing which one. In the living room, her phone vibrated and fell silent before she reached it. A voicemail icon appeared without a corresponding ring, the hallmark of those strange robocalls that worm their way past settings. She pressed play on speaker for lack of patience. A neutral voice, almost polite, said a package required confirmation and invited her to press a number to reschedule delivery. She ended the call before it could finish, then blocked the number, then felt silly for talking to a machine as if it could take offense. She returned to the kitchen and, for no clear reason, opened the drawer where Mark kept takeout menus and batteries. Beneath a stack of coupons lay a small business card with a glossy finish and a perforated edge, as if torn from a sheet. The card bore the same courier logo and a QR code, and on the back someone had written a short code in blue ink, a string of letters and numbers that pretended to be convenient while being the opposite of reassuring. Linda stood very still, listening to the house. Max sighed. The air conditioner clicked on. Somewhere outside, a teenager laughed, a bright sound that bounced off the pavement. She did not like the feeling pooling in her stomach, a mix of ordinary concern and the early outlines of a problem that had not yet introduced itself fully. She set the car with the mail, a quiet act of containment. Then she made tea, the old ritual of taking boiling water to a nervous mind. Steam rose and fogged her glasses, and she let the heat chase a little of the unease down. When she carried the cup to the kitchen table, Daisy hopped up as if about to ask a question and then, finding none to ask, settled again with a flop that rattled the chair. Linda took out her notebook, the small leather one she used for recipes, and added a new page for the weekend. She listed the things that would anchor the next day: morning walk, plant watering, call a neighbor about the fence latch, take note of any deliveries. At the bottom, she wrote the word verification with a question mark, not because she intended to verify anything, but because the word had drifted through her head with the printed slips. She preferred evidence to feelings, but she honored both by writing them down. Before bed, she moved the mail to a shallow bowl and set the bowl on the counter where the morning light would find it. The action felt ceremonial, like turning down a page to mark a place she would return to soon. She checked the thermostat, clicked off the lights, and paused by the hallway mirror. The face that looked back was steady. Retired did not mean helpless. Retired meant time to notice when something in a familiar room had shifted by a degree or two. She kissed her fingertips and touched them to Max's head, then Daisy's, and told them they had done an excellent job guarding the house. The dogs seemed to accept the commendation. The night gathered itself beyond the windows. Linda climbed into bed with the clean fatigue of a day used well, and as she reached for the lamp, she resolved to sort out the tangle in the morning, before the day could run away with her attention. The bulb clicked, darkness settled, and in that last thin ribbon of wakefulness she thought of the misspelled name, the glossy black ink on the whiteboard, and the card with its eager code, each a bead on a short, unthreaded string, waiting for a line strong enough to hold them. The air was still warm when Linda opened her eyes in the dark. It was a kind of awakening that didn't come in confusion. She knew instantly that some small disturbance had nudged her from sleep. At first, the only sound was a ceiling fan turning in slow, steady circles. Then it came again, a faint, tinny vibration from the nightstand, as if her phone were trying not to wake her but couldn't help itself. She reached for it, the screen lighting her face with that pale glow that seemed harsher in the middle of the night. There was a text message from an unfamiliar number. The digits clustered in a way that didn't match any saved contact. The message began politely enough, a greeting, then a claim. There had been suspicious activity on one of Mark's credit cards. It instructed her to verify a set of recent charges by clicking a link or replying with yes or no to confirm the purchases. Her first thought was of all the scams she'd read about in the local paper. She pushed her glasses higher on her nose and read the message again, slower this time, noting the slightly odd phrasing. It used the name of Mark's bank, spelled correctly, but the link was shortened into an unrecognizable jumble. She knew enough to be cautious. She did not click. She did not reply. Still, the fact that it mentioned her son's account in such a specific way made her pulse quicken. It could be a coincidence, a lucky guess by someone sending thousands of similar messages, or it could mean something less random. She decided not to delete it. Instead, she took a screenshot, careful to capture the exact wording, the number came from, and even the time arrived, 1:32 in the morning. The dog stirred at the shift in her breathing. Max lifted his head briefly before sinking back into the comfort of the floor. Daisy's paws twitched, chasing something in a dream. Linda sat at the edge of the bed, phone in hand, wondering if she should call Mark right then. But the thought of breaking into their vacation for something that might be nothing kept her still. She got up, the carpet cool under her feet, and padded into the hallway. In the kitchen, the small bowl of mail sat undisturbed where she had left it. The street outside was quiet, except for the occasional hum of a distant engine. She poured herself a glass of water and sat at the table, phone beside her, the glow from the refrigerator light painting the room in a faint silver. An instinct told her to write down the details. She fetched her notebook again and noted the number, the time, and the message. She underlined the phrase suspicious activity twice, as if by doing so she could pin down its importance. Her pen hovered over the page for a moment before she added a question mark in the margin. She thought of the misaddressed delivery slip from earlier in the evening. How it seemed harmless at the time, just a small oddity. Now, with this message arriving in the dead of night, the two moments floated toward each other in her mind like magnets edging closer to connection. She wasn't yet ready to say they were linked, but the possibility had lodged itself in her. She tried to return to bed, but sleep would not settle over her again. The clock's red digits crept forward in slow, stubborn minutes. At 2:15, her phone buzzed once more. Not a call, not a text, but a notification from her email. She opened it, expecting a store promotion or a newsletter she'd forgotten to unsubscribe from. Instead, she found a message in the spam folder with the subject line, "Action required, account verification." The sender name matched the bank's, but the address beneath it was a strange mix of numbers and letters ending in a domain she didn't recognize. She deleted it without opening, but her unease deepened. Whoever was sending these things wasn't letting the hour of night slow them down. She lay back down, this time keeping the phone within reach. Her thoughts refused to quiet. She pictured Mark and Emily asleep in a hotel room by the ocean, unaware of anything except the rhythm of waves. She imagined Patricia, whose purse always seemed to have a dozen loyalty cards and a neatly folded receipt for every purchase, sleeping just as soundly. If something truly was wrong with their accounts, they would be defenseless until morning. Sometime after 3, she must have drifted off, because the sound of a distant car door startled her into consciousness again. It was followed by the low murmur of voices outside. She sat up, straining to listen. The words were indistinct, as if the speaker stood at the far end of the driveway. A moment later, tires rolled over asphalt, then the quiet returned. She got up and checked the front window. The street was empty, the only movement the slow sway of a palm frond in the humid air. When she finally did fall asleep, it was the restless kind, marked by fragments of dreams she couldn't quite recall. Morning would come soon enough, but she had no idea that it would bring not just confirmation of her unease, but her son's voice tight, urgent, and asking her to explain a problem she hadn't yet had the chance to solve. The morning unspooled with the lazy brightness peculiar to the Gulf Coast, sunlight slipping to the blinds in clean, angled stripes that warmed the kitchen tiles. Linda had just finished measuring out oatmeal, letting the kettle hiss toward a whistle, when her phone began to trill across the table. The name on the screen, in bold letters, tightened something in her chest before she even answered. She slid her finger across the glass and stood very still, the kettle steam feathering the air. "Mom," Mark said without preamble. His voice was pitched higher than usual, strained and thin around the edges. "What happened to the cards?" "What cards?" She knew which cards, of course, but asked to slow him down, to put shape around a panic that would otherwise rush past information. "All of them," he said. "We can't pay for anything. They're all blocked." Over his words, she could hear a sound like wind moving through a shell. It took her a beat to understand it was the ocean. The muted roar of waves rode the line between them, a serene counterpoint to her son's panic. "Take a breath," Linda said. She turned off the stove so the kettle would stop its anxious singing. "Tell me where you are." "A cafe by the boardwalk," he said. "We ordered breakfast, and when I tried to pay, it just declined. It said to contact the bank. I thought maybe I fat-fingered the pin, so I tried the other card. Declined. Then the debit card. Same message." There was a muffled exchange she could not quite make out. Emily, probably. Then Mark again, trying to sound controlled and not quite managing it. "The barista's being nice, but there's a line, and we've been here a while. Can Emily try hers?" Linda asked. "Or Patricia?" "Emily did," he said. "Same thing. Her app won't refresh either. It keeps spinning, and then says an error about security. Patricia left her purse in the car, and when we went out, the parking meter rejected my card too. We're going to get a ticket if we do not move the car, but the kiosk won't take cash, and we have... Mom, I think we have like $8 in small bills between all of us." The frustration broke his voice at the end of the sentence. Linda pictured him with that crease between his eyebrows that showed up when traffic stalled or when a recipe refused to thicken. She steadied her tone until it felt like a hand on the back of his shoulders. "Okay," she said. "Let's not stack the problems. One thing at a time. Did you call the number on the back of the card?" "We tried," he said. "The hold time is ridiculous. Plus the signal here is terrible." The call dropped twice. Emily's phone says something about a system outage, but that might be the Wi-Fi. "Get off the cafe Wi-Fi," Linda said automatically. "Use cellular for anything with accounts." "Is Patricia there?" "Put me on speaker." There was a rustle, a hollow change in acoustics. Then Emily's voice slid into the call, clipped and apologetic at once. "Hi, Linda. Sorry, we're kind of hungry and stuck," Linda finished, but kept her voice light. "I am here. I am listening. Tell me the exact message you saw." "It's the standard decline at the terminal," Emily said. "Then when we tried online, the bank app said unusual activity detected and asked for verification, but will not load the verification page. Is there anyone at the cafe who can hold your tab while you step outside?" Linda asked. "Or Can you leave a name and a number? You are not the first people to have a card hiccup at the beach. Another voice came through, close to the microphone and full of embarrassment and warmth, the kind that always made Linda like her. Linda, it's Patricia. I can leave my driver's license as collateral for a bit. They know me here from church sales. But we still need gas later, and if we cannot pay the hotel tonight, we will not let it get that far, Linda said. She pushed the oatmeal pot off the burner and leaned against the counter, watching a lizard flick along the outside of the window screen, a tiny green pulse of life in the white morning. First, can you get outside and find better reception? Second, can one of you try calling the bank again on speaker while I stay on the line? Hold on, Mark said. The clatter of a chair, the wash of brighter noise. The ocean grew louder, gulls punctuating the air with shrieks that cut into the call at odd angles. Okay, we're in the shade by the bike rack. I'm dialing now. While he did, Linda toggled her cell volume and set the phone to speaker, then took out a pen and one of the sticky notes she used for everything from grocery lists to quotes she wanted to remember. She wrote the date, the time by the oven clock, almost 9 in the morning, and underlined it once to mark the beginning of a sequence. She did not let her mind run ahead. If it ran, it would go to all the wrong places. A polite recorded voice asked Mark to enter his card number. He did. The music that followed was a cheerful tune that sounded like a digital xylophone in a waiting room from an earlier decade. Then at last, a human voice arrived. A representative with a warm tone and a script that Linda had heard enough times in life to recite along with him. Name, confirmation, last transactions. Sir, the representative said after a moment that stretched too long. It looks like there are multiple security holds across several cards associated with your household. Did you attempt online purchases after midnight? No, Mark said. His eyes must have been on Emily, because he said her name like a question. She answered somewhere off to the side, but the wind braided their words. Many holds, the representative repeated. I cannot clear them without verification that I am speaking to the account holder. We will need to call you back at the number on file, or you will need to visit a branch in person. We are out of town, Mark said. I can answer security questions. I understand, the representative said, and he did sound sincere, which almost made it worse. Unfortunately, because of the number of flags, the system requires a callback to the primary number or in-person verification. I can transfer you to a specialist queue, but the wait time may be significant. How significant? Mark asked. More than an hour, the voice replied. The call crackled and dipped. Linda spoke for the first time, aware she was inserting herself into a conversation she technically did not belong in. This is Mark's mother, she said, careful to be calm, unthreatening, a person with a good pen and better intentions. Is there any way we can make a limited exception? They are stranded with a check to pay and a parking meter that will not take cash. Is it possible to unfreeze a small amount or one card temporarily? I am very sorry, the representative said. For security, I cannot discuss account specifics with anyone but the primary holder. If the primary holder can answer a callback on the number ending in... The call popped and then went dead. For a second, the only sound was a rhythmic hush of the ocean filling the absence of the voice that had been speaking. You cut out, Linda said. Can you hear me? Nothing. She looked down and realized it was her own connection that had dipped, which was rare in her neighborhood, but not unheard of when the weather heated in that particular way. Her phone vibrated with a fresh call. She answered, and Mark was already mid-sentence, breathless, frustrated. We lost them. I tried again, and it pushed me back to the beginning. Emily is trying on her phone now. Mom, what do we do? First, pay the cafe if you can, Linda said. Ask if they will take a card number manually once the bank resolves this, or if you can leave a cash deposit. See if Patricia's driver's license as collateral is acceptable for an hour. People want to help if you give them a clear plan. Emily cut in. They will let us go if we leave a number and check in by noon. The manager is kind. I hate this. I hate feeling like we are those people who dine and dash. You are not, Linda said. You are communicating. That matters. Next, move the car if you can, even if it is just to a side street. Or ask the cafe if they have a loading zone you can use for a short time. Avoid the meter for now. We will try. Mark's breathing steadied. What are you going to do? I am going to make some calls from here, she said. You focus on getting to a place with better reception and shade. Do not use any links from messages. Only call the number printed on the back of your cards, even if it takes you 3 hours. Keep your phones charged. If one of you has a low battery, turn it off. Text me your hotel information and the room name, in case I need it. Okay, he said. The word carried relief and hesitation, like a swimmer pushing off the wall into a lap whose length he could not judge. Thank you. I am sorry to ruin your morning. You did not ruin anything, she said, and meant it more than he could know. This is solvable. Go talk to your manager friend. Breathe. Call me in 20 minutes. When the call ended, the silence inside the house felt oddly loud. The dogs lifted their heads, sensing a shift in the atmosphere that no amount of calm voice could conceal. Linda scratched both of them in turn and told them that the morning had simply sprouted extra tasks. Nothing more. She returned the pot to the cool burner and set her untouched oatmeal aside. Appetite belonged to a life without urgency, and she had stepped into a different current. She moved through the kitchen with a practiced efficiency that surprised her, checking that her phone charger sat in the outlet by the hall table, that a pad of paper and a pen were ready, that she had a glass of water on hand. The small ways to make a long call manageable. Then she did something she had not done in a while. She turned on the small radio by the sink and tuned it just high enough to catch a local station. The traffic reporter announced a stall on the causeway and mentioned, almost in passing, that a few banks had experienced a wave of fraud alerts in the county earlier in the week. She filed that detail away without letting her attention fix to it yet. Her phone buzzed, an incoming text from Mark with the hotel name, the room number, and a quick update that the cafe manager had indeed agreed to a promise of payment later in the day. Linda felt a small, precise thankfulness for stranger kindness. It was easier to fix problems when the world remained willing to give you that first grace. She took a breath and dialed, not the general number, but the card services line for banks she knew he used, the one that always buried a human being behind 3 menus and a pin-pad labyrinth. As the recorded voice began its careful instructions, she looked out at the strip of sky beyond the window and told herself this was a part of life that no one teaches you to love. The messy hinge between fear and action. The place where you decide to be the person who makes the next call. She did not know yet what she would say when she reached a human, but she knew how to ask questions, how to listen, how to note answers in clean ink. And she knew, with the steady certainty that had carried her through years of classrooms and emergencies small and large, that she would not stop until her son could order coffee without asking for a manager's mercy. Her phone shifted from music to ringtone to a click that meant the line had opened on the other side. She straightened her shoulders and said her name. The voice that greeted her belonged to a different representative than before, one who explained the policies in measured sentences that implied both empathy and unmovable rules. Linda listened closely, set her pen to the paper, and began to ask the kind of questions that might turn a lock system into a door she could at least knock on. Outside, the brightness sharpened toward full day. Somewhere at a table by the boardwalk, Mark and Emily and Patricia stood, squinting against the glare, figuring out a plan for the next hour. In Linda's kitchen, the radio murmured, the dogs resettled, and her hand moved across the page, dates, times, names. And with each line, she felt the situation shift, small degrees at first, but enough to recognize it. Not solved, not even close, but gathered, like loose fabric drawn into a firmer grip. The voice on the other end of the bank's customer service line had the kind of calm that was either natural or well-rehearsed. Linda listened as the representative walked her through the limits of what could be discussed without her son present. She knew this dance, polite refusals, guarded language, but she also knew that within it there were seams she might work open if she asked the right questions. Without confirming details, the woman said, "I can tell you the account is in security hold status. This usually follows a series of transactions our system deems inconsistent with typical usage. Once a hold is active, all cards associated with the account are automatically frozen." Linda wrote the phrase series of transactions in her notebook, circling it twice. Are these online transactions? In person? A mix? She asked, aiming for a tone of neutral curiosity. I can't confirm that, the representative replied, but I can say that the pattern matched recent fraud alerts in our system. Recent as in today? Linda pressed. Recent as in the last 12 hours, the woman clarified. The fastest way to resolve this is for the account holder to call from their registered number and verify or dispute the charges. Linda thanked her, asked for her name, and hung up. She let the quiet stretch for a moment, aware that her thoughts were beginning to map the pieces. A strange Texan night, the courier slip with a misspelled name, the scrambled phone numbers, and now an official voice hinting at a cluster of questionable activity, all within a short window. The dogs watched her as she moved to the counter and set the kettle back on the stove. She poured water over fresh coffee grounds, the smell unfurling like something steady in the middle of shifting ground. She needed clarity. Her phone vibrated. A text from Mark saying they'd relocated to a shaded bench near the boardwalk and were trying to bank again. A photo followed, the three of them with forced smiles, squinting against the brightness. The image caught on her heart for a beat. She could see they were trying to project calm, but she also recognized the tightness around Mark's eyes and the way Emily's shoulders angled toward him like she was bracing against something. She sent back a short reply. Stay where you are for now. I may have something soon. Linda decided to check the urgent envelope she'd set aside the day before. She had avoided opening it out of respect for her son's privacy. But the situation had shifted into something else entirely. She slid a letter opener under the flap and unfolded a single-page notice on the bank's letterhead. The message was direct. Multiple declined charges had triggered a temporary account suspension. A customer service number was provided, along with a warning. If the account holder did not contact them within 24 hours, the suspension would remain in place until in-person verification could occur. The letter was dated the previous morning. She set it down, the timeline forming in her mind. The letter had arrived before the strange text message in the night, which meant the fraud alert had already been in motion before any scam attempt could have piggybacked on it. The scam, then, might have been opportunistic, someone aware of a wider bank issue, trying to exploit it. She pulled her notebook closer and began listing the facts as they stood. When she reached the line about the series of transactions, she hesitated, remembering the hardware store receipt with its call-about billing note from the night before. She retrieved it from the mail bowl and looked again at the store's name. It was local, just 3 miles away. On impulse, she dialed the store's number printed at the top of the receipt. A man answered in the flat, slightly hurried tone of someone balancing the phone with another task. I have a receipt here, Linda began, with a note about calling regarding billing. I want to check if there was a problem with this purchase. He asked for the date and time. She read them out. A pause followed. That was flagged by the card processor. The man said finally, it was declined, so nothing was charged. We get a few of those every week. Someone tries to run a card that's been frozen. We usually set the item aside and wait for the customer to come back, but in this case, no one did. What was the item? She asked. A cordless drill set, he said. One of the higher-end ones. About $400. Linda thanked him and hung up, the image forming of someone local trying to use her son's car for a purchase that would have seemed harmless enough to slip past, if not for the bank's alert. Her phone rang. This time it was Mark. We got through, he said, sounding both relieved and exasperated. They asked about a bunch of charges we didn't make. Online orders, some store down near you. When I said they weren't ours, they said they'd keep everything locked until they confirmed the list. But they won't even email it. They want to call me back after they finish a full review. Emily's voice came faintly in the background. They said it could take a few hours. Linda leaned over her notes. Did they mention hardware store? Yes, Mark said. That was one of them. And a couple of electronics orders, laptops, tablets, supposedly for pickup in Tampa. That was enough to sharpen her focus. Mark, whoever has your card details isn't far. Some of those attempts are local to me, not to you. He went quiet, processing that. So, someone there is trying to use them? It looks that way, she said. And the bank's hold is what's keeping them from succeeding. For now. There was a long pause. Then, what do you think we should do? Stay put, she said. Don't try to use any card until they clear it. Let me work from here. I can move faster on the local side. She ended the call and looked at the list again. It felt less like a string of disconnected events now, and more like the skeleton of a pattern. Whoever was behind this had enough information to run physical purchases nearby and online orders for local pickup. That meant the leak wasn't random. It was targeted, perhaps from somewhere that had recently handled the card. Linda took another sip of coffee, now cooling, and reached for her phone once more. The morning was slipping toward noon, and the day's shape had shifted entirely. What had begun as a favor for her son had become something else. A narrowing race between whoever held those card details and the clock ticking on the bank's investigation. She wasn't in the habit of thinking of herself as an investigator, but as she gathered the receipts, the letter, and her notes into a neat stack, she realized she'd stepped into that role without deciding to, and in this moment, she couldn't imagine doing anything else. By the time the clock in the kitchen nudged past noon, the Florida heat had reached a kind of density that seemed to press down on every surface. The air outside shimmered above the asphalt, and even the palm leaves looked weary. Linda moved through the house with measured steps, the stack of papers in her hand, like a small case file she was reluctant to let out of her sight. She had decided it was time to open the rest of the mail that had been left on the counter, not just the urgent envelope, but everything. If this was going to involve her directly, she needed every scrap of information. Most of the envelopes were ordinary: a statement for utilities, a flyer from the local grocery store, a dental reminder. But at the bottom of the pile, she found another bank envelope, thinner than the first and dated the same day. She slid it open carefully. Inside was a single page printed with dense, formal text. The top line in bold read, "Suspicious activity. Immediate response required." Below, the letter outlined that several transactions had been attempted using the card, and that due to the frequency and location of these attempts, the bank's automated system had triggered a security lock. What caught Linda's attention was a paragraph halfway down the page. It stated that verification could be made by phone within 24 hours to prevent account suspension. There was a direct number listed, a different one from the general customer service line, and the instructions specifically said that without verification, all associated cards, including debit, credit, and authorized user cards, would remain frozen until in-person review. She sat at the table, reading that section again. The detail was almost hidden, tucked between boilerplate language and an unrelated reminder about fraud prevention tips. Mark had clearly missed this. If he had seen it, he would have called the number immediately rather than try and go through the main bank line. Linda's pen was already in her hand. She copied the number into her notebook, drawing a square around it for emphasis. Before she dialed, she decided to check the bank's website herself. She searched the number, half expecting it to be some outdated contact or a line that had been retired. But there was, listed under fraud and account security, described as a direct channel for verifying flagged transactions. She called, bracing herself for another maze of menus. To her surprise, a human answered within 3 rings. The voice was brisk, but not unfriendly. "This is Linda Perkins," she began. "I'm calling on behalf of my son, Mark Perkins. He's out of town right now and unable to access his account because of a fraud hold. I have a notice here with instructions to verify the charges." The woman on the other end asked Linda to confirm her own identity, then explained that she would need to check whether Linda was listed as an authorized contact. After a brief pause, she returned. "Yes, you are on file for limited account assistance. I can read you the list of flagged transactions for verification, but I cannot make any changes to the account without your son's verbal consent. Are you ready?" Linda positioned her pen over the page. "Go ahead." The representative read off several attempts. The high-end drill at the hardware store, 2 separate online orders for electronics to be picked up in Tampa, a clothing purchase from a boutique about a mile from Linda's own house, and a final attempt at a gas station on the opposite side of the county. "None of these are legitimate," Linda said firmly. "Please mark them as fraudulent." The woman did so, typing audibly in the background. "That will stop further attempts on the existing card numbers," she explained. "But we still need confirmation from Mr. Perkins to reissue the cards and fully restore access. I can note in the system that you've disputed these on his behalf. which will speed up the process once he calls in. Linda thanked her and hung up, feeling the first small thread of progress in the tangle. But the detail that lingered in her mind was the clothing store. She knew the place. It was a small shop that catered to beach tourists, selling sundresses and sandals with price tags far higher than they looked. She passed it every week on her way to the post office. She considered calling the shop, then decided to walk there instead. If someone had tried to use the card there, it was possible the staff had seen the person or even interacted with them. She slipped her keys into her bag, told Max and Daisy she'd be back, and stepped into the glare of the early afternoon. The store was cool inside, scented faintly with coconut and something floral. A young woman behind the counter looked up from arranging a display of straw hats. Linda explained, in a few simple sentences, that her son's card had been used here in a fraudulent attempt earlier that morning. The clerk frowned. "Yes, I remember. It was strange. The man picked out 2 dresses and a pair of sandals, brought them to the register. Then his card wouldn't go through. He tried twice, then said he left his wallet in the car and walked out. Never came back." Linda asked for a description. The clerk described someone in his late 30s, medium build, wearing a baseball cap pulled low. He had no shopping bag with him, just the clothes he carried to the register. Did he seem nervous? Linda asked. The clerk shook her head. Not really. More annoyed, like it had happened before. Linda thanked her and left, the image forming more clearly now. A person confident enough to attempt multiple in-person purchases in the same general area, suggesting they were local and knew the surroundings. As she drove back, she couldn't shake the feeling that the courier slip from the previous evening, the one with a misspelled name, might not have been random at all. It might have been a way to confirm that someone was home or not home before making these attempts. She parked, went inside, and jotted down the new details in her notebook. The missing key detail from the bank's letter had given her a direct line to stop the fraudulent charges, but had also raised new questions. Whoever was behind this wasn't just guessing card numbers online. They were moving through her own neighborhood. Linda set her pen down, stared out the window at the heat pressing against the glass, and realized she wasn't done, not by a long stretch. The moment Linda closed her notebook, the phone rang again. This time it wasn't Mark, but an unfamiliar number with a local area code. She hesitated, then answered, her voice careful. "Mrs. Perkins? This is Dana from Gulfview Bank's fraud department. I understand you spoke with one of our associates earlier today about disputed charges on your son's account." Linda straightened in her chair. "Yes, I confirmed the list and marked all of them as fraudulent. Has there been any activity since?" Dana's tone was measured but direct. "That's why I'm calling. We blocked several more attempts in the last hour. One at a small electronics store downtown, another at a sporting goods shop near the interstate. Both were declined immediately, but it's clear the person has the card information and is trying to find a merchant that hasn't updated their fraud filters. It was one thing to hear about transactions in the abstract. It was another to know the attempts were still happening in real time. Do you have security footage from those stores?" Linda asked. "We've already requested it," Dana said. "If the stores cooperate, we'll have it by the end of the day. But I have to warn you, these cases can take time. We flagged your son's account so no charges will go through, but the person could try using other methods, phone orders, online services, even attempting to open new credit lines." Linda could feel the weight of the words settling in her chest. "So we're not just dealing with stolen card numbers. We might be dealing with stolen identity." "It's possible," Dana admitted. "You should advise your son to place a temporary credit freeze with all 3 major bureaus. That will stop new accounts from being open in his name until he lifts it." After hanging up, Linda didn't waste time. She called Mark immediately, explaining the latest developments and giving the numbers for Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. He sounded exhausted but agreed to start the process right away. While she waited for him to call back, Linda considered her next move. She had the receipts, the urgent letters, the timeline of transactions, and now a direct line to someone in the bank's fraud department. What she didn't have was a clear picture of how the thief had gotten the card information in the first place. Her mind went back to the delivery slip from the first night, the one with the wrong spelling. If that wasn't coincidence, it could mean someone had physically been at Mark's house or nearby, possibly with access to their mailbox. She decided to test the idea. After securing the dogs inside, she drove to Mark's neighborhood. The mid-afternoon heat had emptied the streets of all but a few determined joggers. She parked in front of his house and checked the mailbox. Inside were only a few pieces of mail, nothing urgent, but the lock was loose, looser than she remembered. When she pulled the key out, the door swung slightly open on its own. She walked slowly back toward her car, scanning the surrounding houses. 2 doors down, a delivery van sat in a driveway with no one visible inside. Its paint was the right color for the company on the slip she'd found, but the logo looked faint, almost like it had been printed on a vinyl decal, rather than painted directly. Linda made note of the license plate and drove away. If it was legitimate, nothing would come of it. If not, she might have just recorded an important lead. Back home, she called Dana again and relayed what she'd seen. Dana took down the information and promised to forward it to the investigating officer assigned to the case. The next hour passed in a steady rhythm of calls and notes. Linda contacted the hardware store and the electronics shop that had been hit earlier, asking if they'd noticed the same customer. The hardware store clerk said no. Different staff were working that shift, but the electronics store manager confirmed that a man matching the earlier description had come in, tried to buy a gaming laptop, and left abruptly after his car was declined. By late afternoon, Linda had a growing list of locations, times, and descriptions, all pointing to someone who was confident enough to keep trying despite repeated failures. That confidence worried her. Mark called again, his voice steadier now. Credit freeze is in place. Emily's doing hers too. The bank says they'll call us in the next hour to finalize the disputes. That's good, Linda said. But you should know they're still trying. At least 2 more attempts since we last talked. He let out a slow breath. So what's the plan? Wait and hope they stop. No, she said, glancing at her notebook. The plan is to keep pressure on every place they've tried. I've already spoken to 3 store managers. If this person is local, eventually they'll show up somewhere that can get a clear image. Mark was quiet for a moment, then asked, Mom, why are you so calm about this? She smiled faintly, even though he couldn't see it. Because panic won't fix it. Information will. When they hung up, she returned to the task at hand. She called the boutique again, this time asking the clerk if they had a security camera. The answer was yes, and better yet, the footage was still on the system. Linda gave her email to forward it, knowing she'd pass it directly to the bank and the police. As the sky began to shift toward evening, Linda felt a flicker of something that wasn't quite relief, but wasn't hopelessness either. The thief was still out there, but so was she, tracking, connecting, and ready to move the moment a new piece of the puzzle appeared. Her phone buzzed once more. This time it was a text from Dana. We may have a match on the van you mentioned. Call me when you can. Linda picked up the phone without hesitation. The day had started with confusion and scattered facts, but now she was in motion, following a trail that was getting clearer with every step. Dana didn't waste time with pleasantries when Linda returned her call. We ran the license plate you gave us, she said, her voice clipped with the satisfaction of progress. It belongs to a rental vehicle. Picked up yesterday morning from a location about 4 miles from your address. The rental agreement lists a local address that doesn't check out. It's a vacant property currently for sale. Linda leaned forward at the kitchen table, her pen poised over the notebook. So, whoever's driving it isn't supposed to be there. Correct, Dana confirmed. The officer on the case is going to contact a rental agency to see if they can pinpoint where the van's GPS has been in the last 24 hours. But there's something else. You'll want to hear this. That van matches a description in several reports we've had over the past week. In each case, the driver stopped at houses under the guise of delivering a package, sometimes even leaving a slip like the one you found. It's possible they're using it to case properties or confirm when people aren't home. Linda sat back, the pieces tilting into a new alignment in her mind. So, it's not just about stolen car numbers. They could be running a broader operation, checking mailboxes, stealing account information, maybe even deliveries with personal data. That's one theory, Dana said. And here's where it gets more concerning. In one report from 2 days ago, a resident confronted the driver after he left a slip without knocking. The man claimed he had the wrong address, but the resident noticed he was wearing a shirt with a completely different company's logo under his vest. Linda's pen moved fast, noting the details, which means the courier role is just a costume. He could be blending in anywhere. That's what we're thinking. Dana agreed. We're coordinating with local law enforcement now, but I wanted you to know in case you notice anything unusual in your neighborhood or at your son's house. After the call ended, Linda stayed at the table for a long moment, the ceiling fan moving lazy circles above her. The van wasn't random. The slip wasn't random. And now, she suspected the fraudulent purchases were only one part of a larger, calculated scheme. She decided to walk the neighborhood, partly to clear her head and partly to see if anyone else had noticed the van. The sun was lower now, but still fierce, casting long, sharp shadows across driveways. She made her way toward the corner where the Hendersons lived, their white stucco house always immaculate. Mr. Henderson was out front, trimming the hedges. She asked if he'd seen the van. He nodded, squinting toward the street. Yes, came by yesterday afternoon. Parked for a few minutes like they were looking for an address. Didn't deliver anything to us. Did you see the driver? Ball cap, sunglasses. Couldn't tell much else. He shook his head. I figured it was one of those contractors using a rental while their truck's in the shop. She thanked him and kept walking, stopping at 2 more houses where neighbors confirmed sightings. One woman mentioned that her mailbox lock had been damaged last week, though nothing seemed to have been taken. When Linda got back home, she checked her messages. Mark had left a voicemail saying the bank had called him with confirmation that all fraudulent charges were removed and the cards would be reissued. That was progress, but it didn't solve the question of how the information had been stolen in the first place. She called him back. You need to check your mail when you get home, she told him. And I mean all of it. Credit card offers, insurance forms, anything with personal information. If this man had access to your mailbox, he might have taken more than just your card numbers. Mark sounded weary but alert. Do you think he's still around? I think he's making rounds, she said, and I think he's been operating close to here. They ended the call with an agreement. Mark would give her written authorization to act fully on his behalf with the bank and the police. She could move faster that way, without waiting for him to be in range or on hold. That evening, Linda decided to test one more angle. She drove past the boutique again, parked across the street, and waited. It was nearing closing time, and customers trickled out one by one. Just as she was about to start the car, a white rental van rolled past slowly. The driver didn't stop, but glanced toward the storefronts, his head turning just enough for her to catch the brim of a cap pulled low. She followed at a distance, keeping far enough back to avoid notice. The van took a winding route through several residential streets before turning into the lot of a strip mall. It parked near the side entrance of a discount electronics store, engine still running. A man got out, walked quickly inside, and reappeared less than 2 minutes later empty-handed. Linda didn't need more to be sure. This wasn't chance. The same locations kept appearing in her notes. Electronics, hardware, boutiques, all within a tight radius of her own home. She went straight home and called Dana again, reporting the sighting and giving the exact location and time. Dana's reply was quick and firm. We'll have someone check the surveillance there tonight. If this is the same man, we might finally have a clear shot of his face. As she hung up, Linda realized that what had started as an inconvenient favor for her son had now pulled her into something active, something layered. She wasn't just relaying information anymore. She was in the middle of gathering it, connecting dots faster than official channels seemed able to. And if she was right, the next step might be the one that broke the whole thing open. By the time dusk considered dipping its brush in the sky, Linda's kitchen table had transformed into a quiet command center. She laid out her notes in a loose grid, addresses, times, descriptions, then drew slim lines between them with a pencil sharpened to a point. The page began to resemble a street map only she could read, a private topography of small clues and stubborn questions. She did not linger on what she already knew. She looked instead for the shapes hiding in the clutter. Repeated hours, repeated corners, repeated intentions. She called Dana to ask whether the strip mall cameras had yielded anything usable. The fraud specialist answered on the first ring, her voice alert. The feed was already secured, Dana said, and an officer from a non-emergency unit was reviewing it. A van matched Linda's description, arriving and idling for a handful of minutes, a man stepping out and back in. The view caught a profile, not a full face, but there was a detail that made Linda sit straighter. The man wore a short-sleeved shirt, and on his left forearm a dark mark flickered when he lifted his hand to shield his eyes. The officer thought it might be a tattoo, something angular like a geometric shape or a stylized letter. "Do you know anyone nearby with something like that?" Dana asked. "No," Linda said, already reaching for a blank card to write the words left forearm, dark ink, triangle, or letter. "But I know someone who might have a better camera." 2 blocks over, the Millers had installed a doorbell system, so crisp you could count the threads in a delivery driver's vest. Linda walked over, the heat softened by a wind brushing in from the water, and rang. Mrs. Miller opened with a familiar half-hug and ushered her in before Linda could explain the favor. When she did, the older woman nodded, her face drawing into concern. She pulled up the app and scrolled through clips. On the previous evening, at around sunset, the white van rolled into view, pausing at the stop sign for longer than needed. The camera's fisheye edge caught the driver's arm out the window, tapping the door with his fingers. There it was, on the forearm, a dark wedge of ink, the shape just distinct enough to recognize a triangle nested inside a larger one. "Can I send this to the police?" Linda asked. Mrs. Miller pressed share and entered the email Linda recited. They watched the clip again with the volume up. Under were the van's engine. A tinny radio voice chattered. A sports broadcast, maybe, or a talk show. Nothing that offered a name, but the sound placed the driver's habit in a new compartment. He left the radio on when he worked or when he prowled. Back home, Linda added a small triangle next to the addresses on her map that sat within clear reach of camera views. The pattern was stubborn and strangely precise. The attempted purchases clustered in a crescent on the north side of her neighborhood, always within a short drive to a major road. The timing tightened as well. Most attempts fell within the 2 hours after the mail carrier usually completed the route. She tested the theory against the hardware store's timestamp and the boutique's receipt. It held. The van cruised when households were likely tucking letters onto counters, when parcels rested unseen behind hedges, when a bank envelope could sit for a stretch without curious eyes to pry it open. She called the post office on the edge of town and asked for the station manager, a woman with a no-nonsense cadence of someone who had outlasted several holiday seasons came on. Linda introduced herself and described what she had noticed, careful to keep the tone factual. The manager did not sound surprised. Over the last week, she said, they had logged 3 reports of damaged mailbox locks and 1 of missing pre-approved credit offers. They had advised residents to consider a locking mailbox and to enroll in the Postal Service's daily email that photographed incoming mail. Linda made a note to tell Mark to sign up the moment he got home. "Do you ever see couriers shadowing your routes?" Linda asked. "Not usually," the manager said, "but lately we have noticed a van idling on Bay Cedar after our carrier is done. We've told the carrier to vary the route times." She paused. "If you see that van again, call the non-emergency line right away." Linda thanked her and hung up, the edges of the pattern hardening into something you could grip. The thief watched the rhythm of the neighborhood. He struck after the daily shuffle, when a letterhead could be skimmed from a stack, an account number glimpsed through a windowed sleeve, a name and address snapped by a phone as easily as a sunset. She opened a shallow drawer where Mark kept extra pens and found a folded shopping center directory. On the back, in her tidy script, she began listing every store that offered in-store pickup within a 15-minute radius. A frightening number fit the filter. She called 2 electronics outlets and a big box retailer, and asked to speak with their loss prevention staff. She kept her voice even, respectful, the tone of a former teacher who had perfected the art of requesting help without making anyone feel indicted. By the end of the calls, she had established 3 points of contact, left her number, and asked that they ring if a customer arrived to pick up high-ticket items on an order flag for manual review. "I do not expect you to hold anything," she added, "but if you see a white rental van lingering, perhaps be extra watchful." Her phone pinged. A text from Mark with a screenshot of the credit freeze confirmations from the 3 bureaus. He added a line that made her exhale a little of the day's tension. The bank had scheduled a call back within the hour to complete reinstatement on a single card for emergencies only. "We're staying put," he wrote. "Beach is free. Coffee, not so much." "Good," she replied. "When the bank calls, ask whether any attempts were made to change your mailing address or phone number, and check your email filter for notices routed to spam." While she waited for his answer, Linda stepped out to water the hibiscus by the porch, letting the hoses sunlight into droplets. Across the street, Mr. Henderson lifted his hand in a wave, then motioned her over. He had remembered something, he said. The night before, a young man he didn't recognize had walked door to door with a clipboard, claiming to be checking cable lines. He wore an orange vest, but no company logo. Mr. Henderson had refused to share any account information, and the young man moved along quickly. Linda asked if he had a name, any paperwork, a card. Nothing, just a clipboard and a casual confidence. "Could you describe him?" she asked. 30 or so, Henderson said. "Baseball cap. Left forearm had a mark. I thought it was grease." She thanked him and returned home with the image clicking into the puzzle like a piece that had waited its turn. Not just a bogus courier, but a bogus inspector, too. Different costumes. Same goal. Get close enough to read a name, to glimpse a number, to coax a signature. She called Dana with the new detail. The fraud specialist listened, then said they had, in fact, seen a similar tactic in a nearby county. The same triangle tattoo had appeared on another video there, though the face remained elusive. The officer had a theory. The man might be part of small ring trading roles, one driving, one knocking, one picking up online orders. The ring favored neighborhoods with a high percentage of retirees, people who still received paper statements and liked to chat on porches. Linda looked around her tidy kitchen, her faithful dogs asleep like brackets at either end of the rug, and felt a flare of protective anger. She would not be anyone's soft target. She went to Mark's house again, this time carrying a small toolkit and a purpose. The mailbox lock, already suspect, wobbled under a screwdriver. She replaced the latch with a new one she bought from the hardware store at noon, paid in cash, the map of her day drawn on receipts, and tested the fit until the door closed with a precise click. She placed a laminated note inside that read no outgoing mail. Hold for pickup, a message to discourage opportunists. Then she walked the side yard and noticed an odd scuff near the gate latch, a heel mark pressed into the strip of dirt where the grass thinned. She crouched, pressed her finger to the impression. Recent. She photographed it with a ruler from the glove compartment held beside for scale, then texted the image to Dana with a brief caption. Gate at Mark's. Today, late afternoon. Before she left, she checked the smart thermostat and the router. The router log showed a guest device had pinged the network late the first evening. A brief attempt to connect that failed. The network name was common. The password changed months ago, but the log still recorded the try. She took a screenshot, then changed the password anyway. She drafted a short checklist of Mark. Update passwords, enable two-factor authentication, shred old mail, request paperless statements, enroll in the Postal Service's daily mail preview, pick up a locking mailbox when he returned. Practical defenses. New habits that, once installed, might never be noticed again, until the day they mattered. Driving home, she spotted the van. It turned out a side street 2 blocks ahead and rolled to a stop at the light. From behind, the vehicle was as anonymous as a blank page save for one telling blemish. A scrape on the right bumper, pale plastic showing to the rental white like a healed scar. She hung back, counting the seconds until the light changed, then watched it go left toward the older strip of shops where small businesses live between a barber and a laundromat. She did not follow. Instead, she parked on a side street and called a non-emergency line, giving the location, the direction, the scrape. The dispatcher thanked her and asked her to stay clear. She agreed. She had no desire to get close enough to read that tattoo with her naked eyes. Night settled by increments. The air chilled just enough to carry voices from porches and the clatter of dishes from open kitchens. Linda brewed tea and sat with her map. A new clarity formed. Not the clarity of answers, but the clarity of pathways. One toward the police, one toward the bank, one toward the community that could pivot from isolated targets to a net of witnesses. She wrote a one-paragraph post for the neighborhood message board, plain, unadorned, no drama, advising residents to secure mail, verify identities, and report lingering vehicles. Within minutes, replies stacked. A photo of a similar van from around the corner. A story of a clipboard visitor who knew a first name he should not have known. A note from a teacher on summer break offering to scroll through hours of doorbell footage while her baby napped. Her phone lit with a new message. It was Mark. The bank had completed the emergency reinstatement on a single card with a low temporary limit. The rest would wait until new numbers arrived by courier. This time would have required signature and pickup option at a branch if they preferred. "Mom," he added after a beat, "how did you learn to do all this?" She stared at the question for a moment, feeling the slow, warm tide of memory. Years of lesson plans and parent conferences and field trips that went off the rails, phone trees during hurricane seasons, bake sales with budgets, 1,000 small crises solved by 1,000 smaller acts of paying attention. She typed, "teaching," then added, "and raising you." She deleted the second part, smiling at her own sentiment, and sent only the first. What mattered was not the story of how, but the fact of now. Before bed, she opened the front door for a breath of night air. Across the street, a light flicked on and off in a pattern that meant nothing and everything. A family moving through their evening without incident. She let herself believe for a minute that the man in the van felt the net begin to tighten, that the triangle on his arm prickled with the first hint of consequence. She closed the door, checked the lock by habit, and set her phone face down beside the lamp. When she turned out the light, the map on the table remained, its pencil lines pale in the ambient glow, the dots waiting for morning, for the next connection, for the call that would say, "We see him now." Linda woke before dawn, her mind already running the list she had made the night before. The neighborhood was still, the kind of stillness that made small sounds, like the hum of the refrigerator or the settling creak of wood, feel louder than they should. She set a pot of water to boil and sat down at the table, spreading out her notebook and the map again. Today wasn't for adding more dots. Today was for closing the distance between them. Just after 7, her phone rang. The caller ID read Gulfview Bank. Fraud Division. Dana's voice came through, brisk, but with an edge of something that wasn't there yesterday. Anticipation. "We've got a break," she said. "The electronics store from last night, the surveillance footage gave us a full face. We cross-checked it against the county database, and we have an ID. His name's Kevin Ralston. Small-time history, mostly theft, some fraud. He's been operating with at least one other person. And here's the important part. His last known address is less than 2 miles from your son's place." Linda's fingers tightened around the pen. So he's local and moving within his own backyard. Exactly. Law enforcement is planning to intercept him, but there's a catch, Dana continued. They want to catch him in the act with clear evidence tying him to the stolen information. That's stronger in court than just possession of stolen data. Linda's mind jumped ahead. "So you want to use a controlled pickup? A sting." "That's the idea," Dana confirmed. "We can coordinate with the bank to flag a fake transaction for in-store pickup. But we'll need someone who can monitor the location discreetly. I thought you might want to know when and where it's going to happen." By 8 o'clock, Linda had showered, dressed, and was in her car. She wasn't reckless. She knew her role wasn't confront anyone, but she could keep eyes where they were needed. The police had chosen a mid-sized electronics retailer that Kevin's accomplice had used before. The bait order would be placed using a dummy card linked to the bank's investigative account. It would appear to the thieves as though they had succeeded in cracking another number. At 9:30, Linda was parked 3 rows back from the store entrance, her sunglasses on and her notebook open on the passenger seat to give her an excuse to look around without drawing attention. The air was heavy with the scent of sun-warmed asphalt. Inside the store, a plainclothes officer was waiting behind the pickup counter. pretending to check inventory. 2 more officers in unmarked cars flanked the lot's exits. At 9:50, a familiar shape appeared at the far edge of the lot, the white rental van. Linda recognized the scrape on the bumper immediately. It rolled slowly toward the store, hesitated as if looking for a space, then backed into a spot near the side entrance. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. The ball cap was there, and when his arm swung into view, the triangle tattoo flashed against the skin. Linda kept her gaze loose, scanning as if she were waiting for a friend. Kevin walked with the brisk confidence of someone who had done this many times. He headed straight for the pickup counter. Moments later, another man emerged from the passenger side, taller, leaner, carrying a clipboard. He didn't go inside. Instead, he strolled along the storefront, glancing into the windows and then out toward the lot, playing the lookout. From her position, Linda saw the subtle shift in the lot's energy. One of the unmarked cars rolled closer. The tall man noticed, his head tilting ever so slightly, but before he could signal Kevin, the store doors burst open. 2 uniformed officers stepped out with Kevin between them, his hands already behind his back. The tall man bolted, but didn't make it 3 steps before another officer intercepted him. Linda's phone buzzed Dana. "We've got them," she said, a hint of relief in her voice. "And we recovered multiple clone cards, including one with your son's number. You can head home. I'll call later with the full rundown." But Linda didn't start the car just yet. She sat for a moment, letting the tension drain in slow increments. The white van was still there, door hanging open, a silent witness of the morning's reversal. For the first time since that strange courier slip had landed on Mark's porch, she felt the balance tip back towards safety. On the drive home, she passed through Mark's neighborhood, noting the mailboxes standing in neat lines. A postal truck hummed down the street, the carrier waving. She waved back, thinking of the lock she had installed, the precautions she had written out, the small act that had built to this moment. At home, the dogs greeted her with a kind of unfiltered joy that had nothing to do with arrests or fraud cases. She sat on the couch, letting them crowd close while her phone lit up again, this time with Mark's name. "They caught him," she said before he could speak. "I just got off the phone with the bank," Mark replied. "They told me, 'Mom, I don't know how you did all this from your kitchen, but you saved us.' I mean, you saved a lot of people, probably." Linda smiled faintly, looking at the sunlight shifting across the floor. "I just connected the dots." But in her mind, she knew it had been more than that. It had been the patience to notice what didn't fit, the stubbornness to follow it, and the quiet conviction that no problem, no matter how tangled, was beyond untangling if you kept at it long enough. The case wasn't technically over, but the rhythm of her day began to return. She made coffee, opened the windows to let in the salt air, and, for the first time in days, didn't feel the urge to keep one ear on the street outside. The van was gone. The triangle tattoo was someone else's problem now, and the map on her table, though still dotted with notes, felt less like an urgent warning and more like a record of what persistence could do. Linda waited until the dog settled, until the kettle clicked off and the room felt steady again, then called Mark. The line connected on the second ring, the sea still whispering faintly behind his voice. He sounded braced, like a runner waiting for a starting pistol, and bad news at the same time. "Okay," he said, "tell me everything." She did not start with the scary parts. She started with the shape of the day, clear and linear, a path he could place his feet on. She told him there had been a controlled pickup at the electronics store, that officers and bank investigators had coordinated a sting, that a man with a triangle tattoo on his left forearm had walked in to collect a fake order and walked back out in handcuffs. She told him the white rental van was real, the scrape on its bumper unmistakable, and that a second man had been detained in the parking lot while pretending to be nothing more than an observer with a clipboard and a cool morning to kill. On the other end, she heard the air leave his lungs, a long unspooling. "That was today?" he asked, disbelieving and relieved in the same breath. "This morning," she said, "before you finish your first cup of coffee. The bank will send a formal update, but Dana from their fraud team called me as soon as it happened." "Dana," he repeated, rolling the name around like something that might become real, if said twice. So they really had our car numbers. Not just yours, Linda said gently. The officers found multiple clone cards and a small device used to encode magnetic stripes. The van had been with disguised mail. Junk flyers folded around envelopes with windows showing names and addresses. There was a list of streets, including yours, marked with checks and times, like a delivery schedule. The police think they followed the letter carrier's route, then circled back to watch who picked up mail quickly and who did not. Emily came onto the line, the wind in the speaker dropping, as if she cupped the phone. Were our names on that list? Yes, Linda said. Your street. Not your full names, but the house number with a note that read New Autopay Confirm, which explains why they tried so many transactions within a short window. They were testing where the number still worked. There was a small silence, the kind that meant the picture had clicked into focus, and no one liked what it showed. Patricia's voice arrived next, careful and maternal, and edged with indignation. How did they get the numbers in the first place? Pieces, Linda said. They do not need everything from one place when they can stitch it from many. A skimmed card at Terminal 1 week, a mail slip noting the last 4 digits of a new card the next, a phony courier delivering nothing but attention. They also had a tablet with access to public databases, property records, business filings, anything that can confirm a name and address. The officers think they used those to sound convincing when they knocked on doors, as supposed inspectors. Mark let out a sound that was not quite a laugh. I still cannot believe you were part of the sting. I was in a car, taking notes, she said, letting a smile enter her voice so he could hear it and borrow steadiness from it. No heroics, just a good parking spot. Emily exhaled, the tension thinning. What happens now with the cards? The bank has already removed the fraudulent charges and locked the old numbers for good, Linda replied. They reinstated one card with a very low temporary limit for emergencies. New cards will be issued and held at the branch for pickup with photo identification. No more deliveries. And I need to tell you something that cannot wait for you to get home. She flipped a page in her notebook, eyes sliding to a line she had drawn and underlined. While the accounts were frozen, a city notice came through about your water bill. The auto pay was tied to the car that got suspended, so last night's run failed. There is a grace period, but the notice said there would be a late fee if it was not paid by end of day. I did not want you to come home to a notice or a penalty, so I used the emergency card to pay it online. I kept a screenshot. The amount was modest, and it posted immediately. Mark was quiet, and in that quiet there was a layer of relief. The practical kind, the domestic kind, the kind that preserves the ordinary rhythms that make a house feel like a home. Mom, he said softly, and then, as if embarrassed by the softness, he added, Thank you. Truly. You would have done it for me, she said, and it took all of 3 minutes. Patricia sighed, the sound bright with gratitude. We owe you more than 3 minutes. You owe me a walk with Max and Daisy on a cooler day, Linda said, and maybe a slice of pie. The rest is my pleasure. She kept moving, because motion kept worry from hardening. She told them she had replaced the mailbox latch at their house, that she had left a note inside instructing the carrier to hold outgoing mail, and that she had spoken with the station manager about reports of damaged locks in the area. She told them she had changed the Wi-Fi password and printed a checklist for when they got back. Update passwords, enable two-factor authentication, enroll in paperless statements and the Postal Service's daily email with photographs of incoming mail, shred old documents, switch important bills to account numbers that do not sit in plain sight on windowed envelopes. Emily asked about neighbors. Should we warn anyone? I already posted a short note on the neighborhood board. Nothing alarming, just practical. And I spoke to the Millers and Mr. Henderson. They appreciated the heads up. People are paying attention now, which is half the battle. Is there anything else we should do while we are here? Mark said, the problem solver in him surfacing as relief made room for planning. You have already done the big thing, she said. The credit freezes with the bureaus. When you have a quiet half hour, run a free credit report and scan for anything unfamiliar. If there's a false address change or a new account you do not recognize, we'll dispute in writing and keep copies of everything. The bank will assign a case number, Write it on every document you send. And this might sound small. Pick a passphrase of your accounts that is a sentence you can remember easily, but no one else would guess. Not a pet name, not a birthday. Make it long, like a short line from a book you love. To strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield, Emily said, dry and wry and a little awed. That one has always been mine. That will do, Linda said, warmth in her voice. Capitalize it in a way only you would remember. Add a punctuation mark that matters to you. They were quiet again, but this time the quiet felt like a soft landing. The ocean spoke in the background, the bright, indifferent hush of a place where people built sandcastles and forgot their shoes under tables. Linda let the image rise without bitterness. You should salvage the afternoon, she said. You came for the beach. Let this morning be morning, and put the rest into a folder we will label resolved. Before we go, Mark said hesitant, how did you know to do all this? I mean, the calls and the timeline and the maps and the sting. I was spiraling. You moved. I taught teenagers for decades, she said, smiling again because the truth amused her. If you can decode why one student never forgets her homework and another always loses it between third period and lunch, you can spot patterns anywhere. And motherhood teaches you to stand in a doorway and see everything at once. The closed cabinet that should be open, the open back gate that should be shut, the dog who is too quiet in a room he is never quiet in. This was the same, just louder. Patricia's laugh was soft and grateful. Next time we plan a getaway, we bring you along at the start, not the end. Bring me along after I nap, Linda said, and I want a chair with shade. They promised shade and a long weekend sometime before the first cool snap, then hung up to wander toward the water and reclaim a day that threatened to slide away. Linda stared at the phone for a moment, then turned to the practicalities that remained. She called Dana for the promised full rundown. The fraud specialist filled in the edges. The van had a false magnetized sign in the back. 3 options rolled up like posters. Courier, cable, utilities, each one believable at a glance. Inside the glove compartment, they had found a notebook of addresses, a spare set of mailbox keys collected from older subdivisions that still use universal locks, and a list of stores with notes like manager lacks, camera broken, manual override if friendly. Will there be charges? Linda asked. Felonies. Dana said, possession of cloning equipment, identity theft, attempted fraud, conspiracy. The district attorney will like the surveillance video. The list in the glove box ties intent to action. And the people whose names were in that bin, we have a team contacting them today. Dana replied, your neighborhood is on the list. What you posted on the board probably saved us a day. After they hung up, Linda sat for a long moment and let the house speak around her. The radio by the sink murmured a song about ordinary love. The air conditioner thumped once, then settled into its steady breath. Max snored like a tiny engine. Daisy dreamed, paws twitching, chasing imaginary birds across a lawn she believed belonged entirely to her. Linda opened her notebook one last time and wrote a short paragraph at the top of a fresh page. Dates, the sting, the arrests, the payments resolved, the checklist to finish when Mark returned. She drew a small box beside each item and checked the ones she had already completed. The last box she left blank and labeled it only with a word she liked for days that had wrapped themselves around a problem and squeezed until it loosened. Closure. Her phone buzzed with a text. It was a photo from Mark. 3 pairs of bare feet on warm boards, coffee cups held up in salute, the horizon a flat band of light. Below it he had typed, to the woman who took us back from the edge and paid the water bill before we knew it needed paying. Emily had added, to the teacher who never stopped teaching, and Patricia, to the daughter I never had. Linda felt her eyes prick. She let the feeling pass across her face unhidden, then wiped it away with the back of her hand and stood. There were dishes to wash and a porch to sweep, and a call to return from a neighbor who wanted to install a locking mailbox before the week ended. The ordinary had returned, quiet and precious, and for the first time since the stack of envelopes had sat on the counter and looked like any other stack, Linda believed the worst had passed. She put the kettle back on and, while the water climbed to her boil, whispered a line into the room, not for anyone to hear but for the space itself. That will do. The following morning dawned clear, the kind of blue Florida sky that looked almost scrubbed, as if the night had swept away every lingering trace of heat and worry. Linda stepped outside with her coffee, letting the sunlight rest on her shoulders. The street was quiet, but not still. Mr. Henderson was already out, rolling his trash bin to the curb, and a pair of kids were chalking bright arrows across the sidewalk in front of the Miller's house. There was nothing in the air that hinted at the chaos of the past few days, and that in itself felt like a victory. She had an appointment at the local bank branch for late morning. Dana had arranged for her to meet a branch manager, collect a single temporary emergency card she had activated for Mark, and review a few remaining account notes. Linda decided to get there early. She wanted to see for herself that everything was squared away, that no loose threads dangle for someone to tug at later. Inside, the branch was cool and bright, smelling faintly of polished floors and printer toner. A young man in a navy shirt greeted her, already aware of who she was. "We've been expecting you," he said, guiding her toward a glass-walled office in the back. The branch manager, a woman named Clarissa with a firm handshake, spread a slim folder across her desk. "We've closed the compromised accounts, issued the new cards, and flagged your son's profile for heightened monitoring for the next 90 days. Any unusual activity will trigger an immediate call to him, and since you're listed as authorized, to you as well." Linda nodded, scanning the documents. The bank had even added a secondary password, a verbal code required before any transactions could be approved by phone. Clarissa slid a small envelope toward her, the emergency card inside, its limit set intentionally low. "I understand you've been very proactive," Clarissa said with a hint of admiration. "Dana told me you were instrumental in gathering details for the investigation." Linda smiled faintly. "Proactive is just another word for making sure my son can buy a cup of coffee without an officer on standby." They both laughed, and then Clarissa's expression softened. "There's something else you should know. The police recovered several pieces of mail from that van that didn't belong to your family. We've been helping contact the affected customers. One of them was an elderly woman in the next town over who had nearly $2,000 siphoned from her checking account. She said she wouldn't have realized for weeks if we hadn't called." That knowledge settled in Linda's chest, heavy and sharp. "Then it wasn't just us," she said quietly. "No," Clarissa agreed, "but because of the sting, they won't get another chance." By the time Linda left the bank, she felt lighter. The folder in her bag wasn't just paperwork. It was proof that the mess was being contained, that the people who needed to be watching would keep watching. Her next stop was Mark's house. She let herself in with her spare key and began going through the checklist she'd written. She opened every cabinet and drawer where bills might be tucked away, shredding anything with sensitive information. She logged into utility accounts on Mark's computer, confirming that autopay was now tied to the new, uncompromised card. The Wi-Fi password she'd changed the day before was written neatly on a sticky note inside a kitchen cupboard, right where she knew Emily would look for it. At the dining table, she placed a manila envelope labeled security in bold black marker. Inside, she left copies of the credit freeze confirmations, the updated account passwords, the bank's verbal code, and a step-by-step guide for checking their credit reports. On top, she taped a single sheet titled "What to Do Next Time," not because she believed there would be a next time, but because preparedness was a better companion than hope alone. While she worked, her phone buzzed with text from Dana. "Just got word. Ralston and his accomplice have been officially charged. The DA is moving forward. Thank you again." Linda allowed herself a moment to stand in the middle of the quiet house and take a breath that went all the way down. It was over, not the process. Cases and court dates would stretch on, but the part that had stolen her sleep and filled her mornings with phone calls and note-taking. The urgent part was done. She locked up, drove home, and spent the afternoon doing the most ordinary things she could think of: laundry, trimming the hibiscus, making a pot of vegetable soup. The kind of tasks that restored the rhythm of a day. Just before sunset, her phone rang. It was Mark, and this time there was no static, no background panic. Only the easy murmur of someone calling because they wanted to, not because they needed to. "We're heading home tomorrow," he said. "Emily and I were talking. We want to take you out for dinner this weekend. Somewhere nice. No dog-sitting duties, no emergencies. Just us." "That sounds perfect," Linda said. "But you should know I'm still expecting that pie." "You'll get pie," he promised. "And shade." When the call ended, Linda stepped out onto the porch. The streetlights were beginning to hum to life, and the neighborhood felt safe in the quiet, the kind of safety that came not from luck, but from work. Hers, the banks, the officers, even the neighbors who had paid attention when asked. She thought about how close this had come to spiraling further, about the little decisions along the way that had tilted the outcome toward resolution. And she thought about the fact that it had started so simply, a favor for her son, a stack of mail, a weekend with the dogs. Tomorrow, they would come home. She would hand over the manila envelope and watch them read the list. See the relief in their faces as they understood just how much had been untangled. And then, for the first time since this began, she would let herself stop thinking about it. The sky deepened indigo. Somewhere down the street, a screen door slammed and a laugh carried across the warm air. Linda closed her eyes and let the sound settle in. It was the sound of a street returning to itself, of a day ending the way it should, without alarms, without urgency, without a white van in sight. By the time the sun had climbed to a bright, forgiving height, Linda had opened the curtains and let the house breathe. She vacuumed the rug where Max liked to drag his toys into a cheerful mess, rinsed the dog bowls until they shone, and set a lemon pie on the counter to cool. She checked the manila envelope one last time, counting the pages by touch as if the weight of paper itself could promise peace. Credit freezes confirmed, new passwords written in neat script, a short list titled What We Learned and How We'll Remember It. The doorbell rang mid-morning, a quick, eager sound that tumbled to the hallway like laughter. When she pulled the door open, there they were, Mark, sun-flushed and sheepish, Emily, hair mussed by the wind and eyes soft with worry finally letting go, and Patricia, stately even in sandals, gripping a bouquet of sunflowers that looked like small suns caught on stalks. "Before anybody talks," Mark said, already stepping inside, "I need to do this." He wrapped his arms around his mother and squeezed with the long insistence of someone who had measured the distance between what could have happened and what did, and felt lucky to be standing on the right side of it. When he let go, Emily squeezed in, then Patricia, and for a moment there was too much shoulder and apology and gratitude to separate one from the other. Come in, Linda said, stepping back. "The dogs will explode if they do not see you in the next 5 seconds." Max did not explode so much as melt against Mark's legs with a dignified groan, while Daisy bounded and circled and sneezed from sheer joy. The scene untied something tight in Linda's chest, and she found herself laughing, the sound an old door finally swinging wide. They gathered in the kitchen like they always did, because kitchens are where families tell the stories they could have told in other rooms but never do. Linda poured iced tea and slid the pie to the center of the table, the sunflowers standing sentry near the window. The air smelled of lemon and sugar and the faint, clean whisper of fresh laundry. She pushed the envelope toward Mark with 2 fingers. "This is everything," she said. "You do not have to study it today. You can leave it on the counter and pretend it is just a menu from a place you might try one day. But when you are ready, it will answer questions you have not thought to ask." Mark ran his hand over the label, as if to test whether the letters were truly attached to the paper. "You handle the worst of it," he said, the sentence warming as it moved across the table. "We spent a morning on hold and felt heroic for not throwing our phones into the sea. You spent days turning a mess into a plan. I had help," she said. "A very organized woman named Dana, a branch manager with the patience of a saint, and a neighborhood full of people who like to notice things. Patricia set the sunflowers in a pitcher and arranged them the way people arrange future promises. Well, you have us now," she said. "We can notice with you, and feed you, and remind you to nap." Emily reached for Linda's hand, the grip small and sure. "I kept thinking about you while we were sitting at that cafe," she said. "How you always know which line to stand in, which person to ask, which door to knock on. I did not know how you learned that, but I am going to watch you until I do." "You will not have to watch long," Linda said. "Most of it is remembering to breathe while everyone else forgets." They ate pie in happy silence for a few minutes, The kind of silence that needed no decoration. Outside, a lawnmower droned somewhere down the block, a low, contented note that said the day belonged to ordinary tasks again. When the plates were mostly clean and the dogs had settled into their particular brand of peaceful heap, Mark stood and took the envelope to the dining table. Opening it like a book he had saved for the right afternoon, he read slower than usual. Linda watched his face change with each page, the way his brow smoothed, the way his mouth tipped, the way something in his shoulders lifted and did not return. Emily leaned over his shoulder, nodding at certain lines as if she were recognizing her own handwriting there. "This is not just instructions," Mark said at last, turning the final page. "It is a map to being less scared next time anything hard happens." "Good," Linda said. "Then you see it correctly." Patricia, who had been quiet for the length of a teacup, cleared her throat. "I would like to say something, and I do not want anyone to interrupt me for at least 3 sentences," she announced, a teacher's daughter in full command. She folded her hands. "First, thank you for paying that water bill. I did not sleep properly until I knew a faucet would still behave like a faucet when we got home. Second, I am sorry we left you with an easy weekend that turned into work no mother should have to do without help. Third, we're going to take you to dinner, and you're going to order the most expensive fish, and if you mention money, I will make a scene." Linda laughed and lifted her palms in surrender. 1, you are welcome. 2, you gave me a problem that wanted solving and the tools to solve it. 3, I look forward to being scandalously indulgent. Mark shut the envelope and tapped it twice, settling the pages into agreement. "I have something to say, too," he added. "When I said, 'What happened to the cards?' I meant, how did the ground drop out from under us? What I should have said was, 'Will you stand here until it stops shaking?' And you did. You stood." "I sat," Linda corrected gently, "at a kitchen table with a pen. But yes, I promise you I will always sit." The afternoon unspooled like a ribbon pulled slowly from its loop. They took the dogs for a walk to the corner and back, the kind of walk where no one is truly walking the dogs because the dogs are walking themselves, stopping to sniff every blade of grass that had had a thought since yesterday. They paused at Mr. Henderson's, where he told Patricia that he had seen a promotion for a locking mailbox and was considering becoming a late adopter of something practical, which made everyone smile. They waved at the Millers, who sent Linda a thumbs up and a silent thank you in the international language of neighbors who know who watered whose plants last summer. Back at the house, Mark and Emily offered to fix dinner. Linda, usually unable to resist the choreography of a kitchen, let them take over without comment. She sat at the counter instead with Patricia and supervised the slicing of peppers and the summoning of garlic to a pan. She allowed herself to lean back, to feel the weight of the chair hold her, to let the ordinary domestic sounds, fridge door, drawer slide, spoon clink, arrange themselves into a song that required nothing from her but listening. Over pasta and salad and a bottle of wine that had waited too long for an occasion that had now finally arrived, conversation shifted into the spaces life makes after scare, a little remembering, a little planning, a little promising. Emily said she was going to start a folder on their computer for idiot-proof passwords and receipts, and Mark said there was no such thing as idiot-proof, only idiot-resistant. And Linda said that was too harsh and too funny to be wrong. Patricia announced she was going to host a small gathering for the block with coffee and cookies, and a police officer invited to talk about home security. And Linda agreed to bake 24 lemon bars, as long as this did not turn into a competition, in which everyone pretended it was not a competition. At twilight, when the edges of the sky softened to lavender and humidity Jen told, Mark carried a stack of clean dishes to the sink and paused. "Can we sit outside for a bit?" he asked. His voice turned down to the volume of serious and simple things. They brought chairs to the porch and watched the street turn itself over to evening. Porch lights bloomed one by one, like decisions made and kept. "Tell me what you thought this morning when you woke up," Emily said finally, her head against Linda's shoulder as if she had always fit there. "I thought I would make coffee," Linda answered. "Then I thought you would be home, and I should consider which words might arrive cleanly and not bring the panic back. Then I realized I did not have to consider words at all. You would come through the door, and we would stand in the kitchen, and the room would do half the work." You believe rooms do work? Patricia asked, amused. I do, Linda said. Some rooms are where things break, and some rooms are where they mend. This house has always done mending well. Mark leaned forward, elbows on knees, looking out at nothing and everything. I did not take you to the beach, he said, a smile tucked into the last word. We left you with a pair of dogs and a stack of mail and the world's worst timing. And you did all this. It feels wrong to say thank you the regular way. It feels like we need a new word. Make one up, Linda suggested. Word should serve the moment. He thought, how about this? Next time, we do not leave you. We bring you. Linda turned the sentence over the way a person might turn a shell found at low tide, admiring its ordinary perfection. She looked at her son, tired and bright, chastened and grateful, and felt the soft ache that arrives when love makes room for relief. Next time, she said, take me to the beach instead of the bank. They laughed, and the laugh braided into the crickets starting up in the hedges, and a car door thunking shut somewhere down the block. The air smelled like grass and a neighbor's dinner, and for once no urge of vibration interrupted the hour. When the stars began pricking into view, they gathered plates and glasses, and the remains of a day done well, and went inside. Later, when the house quieted and the guest room held suitcase zippers and muffled conversation, Linda stood at the sink and washed the last glass by hand, not because it needed it, but because the motion soothed her. She dried it, set it in the cabinet, and turned off the light. The dark felt complete, like a book closing on a chapter that knew exactly when to end. She paused in the hallway, looking on Emily asleep with an arm flung across a pillow, on Patricia reading with her glasses low on her nose, on Mark leaning down to scratch Max behind the ears in a way that said, I am here, I am here, I am here. In her own room, she opened the window a little wider and let the night in. She thought of the triangle tattoo and the white van and the sting and the folders and the phone calls that had made up the strangest weekend she had had in years. And then she let the thoughts pass like boats at a distance, their lights small and steady where the water took them. She placed her notebook in the drawer, the pencil snapped to a perfect point, the pages ready for grocery lists and holiday menus, and, if necessary, a new map of a new problem some other season. The bed welcomed her. Sleep did, too. Morning would bring breakfast and plans and a walk with the dogs before the heat set its hand on the day. It would bring the return of the cheerful grind, the errands and small kindnesses, and familiar jokes. It would bring a bank envelope that said only welcome and meant it. And if some future day brought something else, another letter, another knock, another odd slip tucked under a mat, Linda knew what would happen. She would put the kettle on. She would call the right numbers. She would stand at the doorway between fear and action and choose, again, the chair, the pen, the steady voice. She would live in a house that mended, among people who noticed, with dogs who knew the sound of a leash and the shape of a good life. She turned off the lamp and smiled into the dark, the kind of smile no one needed to see to know it was there. The weekend had begun as a favor and turned into a trial and ended as a promise. The promise was not that nothing would go wrong again. The promise was that if it did, they would be a family who knew how to meet it, and that, she thought as sleep pulled her under, would always be enough.